Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us this evening from the Royal Australian Navy is Seaman Hannah Farley. Today marks the centenary of the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. When the First World War came to an end on the Western Front on the 11th of November 1918, thoughts of the victorious nations turned to formalising the peace and exacting a toll on Germany for its role in the war. The Treaty of Versailles was one of 5 formulated at the Paris Peace Conference as part of the negotiations at the end of the war. The major sanctions imposed by the treaty included the disarmament of Germany, payment of very large reparations to the Allies, and demilitarisation of the Rhineland, as well as the surrender of territory which had been part of Germany before the First World War. Germany reluctantly signed the treaty on the 28th of June 1919, 5 years to the day since Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand had been assassinated, leading the world to war. Australia was represented at the Paris Peace Conference by Prime Minister Billy Hughes, Deputy Prime Minister Sir Joseph Cook, and Lieutenant Commander John Latham, Royal Australian Naval Reserve. On the same day as the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, Gallipoli veteran Private James Joseph Fisher succumbed to illness in a Caulfield hospital. We will hear his story shortly. Today, we are honoured to welcome Colonel Craig Bickle, representing the Chief of Joint Operations. We also welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that continue to serve, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier.
reverse. Party rest on!
If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Party present arms.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is birth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. Enjoy the strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Party shoulder arms. Party order arms.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 Australian men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private James Joseph Fisher. James Joseph Fisher was born on the 14th of April 1883 in Emerald Hill, South Melbourne, Victoria, to John and Annie Fisher. He was one of 11 children, 8 of whom were boys. James grew up around Footscray and attended school locally. He was a member of his school cadets and would go on to serve in the 5th Australian Infantry Regiment with at least 2 of his brothers, Walter and John. After leaving school, he was apprenticed to W.M. Griffiths in North Melbourne for 3 years and gained his qualification as a sheet metal worker. By the time the First World War began, Fisher had married and him and his wife had welcomed 5 children into the world. The family lived at Sunshine and Fisher worked as a tinsmith. Fisher enlisted for service with the AIF on the 29th of March 1915, joining the newly raised 23rd Battalion. He became a member of C Company, and with his previous experience in the militia, he was promoted to sergeant a little over a month later. 2 of his brothers, Walter and John, enlisted at the outbreak of the war, both joining the 7th Battalion and were already abroad with the AIF. Fisher embarked with the 23rd Battalion from Melbourne on the 10th of May aboard the transport ship Euripides, bound for Egypt. While in Egypt, he would likely have had the chance to meet up with Walter, who had been badly wounded during the Battle of Lone Pine in early August and was recovering in Egypt. Walter would be sent back to Australia aboard Euripides, which had brought James to Egypt. Sadly, John had been mortally wounded during the Battle of Lone Pine and had died on a hospital ship en route to Egypt. He was buried at sea. The 23rd Battalion arrived on Gallipoli in early September and was sent to occupy positions at Lone Pine. Lone Pine remained so dangerous that the occupying battalion was relieved every day. The 23rd Battalion alternated its stints on the line with the 24th Battalion. On the evening of the 5th of November, Fisher was sitting in C Company's headquarters dugout at Brown's Dip with Lieutenant William Cull and Sergeant Major James Purcell when a Turkish shell hit their dugout. Cull later wrote of the incident, "I was giving instructions to Sergeant Major Purcell and Sergeant Fisher when a Turkish bomb found us. It burst immediately on piercing the roof. Purcell, standing a little way off, was killed instantly. Fisher had, amongst other wounds, one of his hands badly mutilated." Fisher's left hand was badly damaged, though no bones were broken, and he was evacuated via Malta to England. Here he was admitted to the 3rd London General Hospital at Wandsworth on the 8th of January 1916. The severity of the wound to his hand meant that he was no longer fit for frontline service, and in August 1916 he was sent home to Australia for home service. Fisher was discharged from the AIF on the 2nd of February 1917. He continued to serve, however, working in the recruiting depot in Melbourne. Despite having a hand that barely worked, Fisher once again enlisted on the 30th of September 1918. Fisher enlisted into the Australian Naval and Military Expeditionary Force for a period of 2 years. He embarked for Sydney on the 18th of December, bound for Rabaul. Service in the tropics had a detrimental effect on Fisher's health, and in April 1919, he was diagnosed with malaria. He arrived back in Sydney on the 14th of June and was sent via rail to Melbourne. After arriving in Melbourne, Fisher, who was suffering the effects of malaria, which was further compounded by pneumonia and influenza, was admitted to number 11 Australian General Hospital at Caulfield. His condition deteriorated, and over the ensuing days, on the 28th of June, the day of the Treaty of Versailles was signed in France, James Fisher died. He was laid to rest in the Footscray Cemetery. He was 36 years old. Along with James, Walter and John Fisher, the remaining 5 Fisher brothers also served during the First World War. Edward, a decorated veteran of the Boer War, would serve in France with both the 21st and 24th Battalions. Ellie, Terence and George served together on the Western Front with the 3rd Pioneer Battalion. Cecil served with the 58th Battalion and was awarded a military medal in August of 1918 for repeatedly rescuing wounded men under shell fire during a heavy German bombardment near Bray. These 5 brothers returned to Australia during 1919. A 9th son, Robert, also tried to enlist no less than 5 times, but was rejected due to his poor eyesight. The Fisher family stands amongst but a few to have sent so many family members to war. The Hancock family of Murray, Victoria, also sent 8 sons abroad, and the Fighting Lean family of South Australia sent 11 family members to the war. All were committed to defending the British Empire. Each of these families suffered loss and provide a small window in time of Australian society in 1919, where not one family around the nation had remained unaffected by the war to end all wars. James Fisher's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private James Joseph Fisher, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Party shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Party present, arms. Party shoulder, arms. Catapult party in words. Turn. Catapult party quick. March.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain. Has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.